and welcome to a special, particularly stylish episode here on Viking.TV with me, Gaby Huddart. Stylish because today I'm going to be talking to someone who has spent their career in the world of fashion. As a TV presenter, author, podcaster and designer. She began working in the US for Giorgio Armani and John Galliano. And Susannah Constantine then went on to present the hugely successful What Not to Wear series with her friend Trinny Woodall. And together they co-wrote several best-selling books. More recently, Susannah has produced her fabulously entertaining My Wardrobe Malfunction podcast. She's written her autobiography, Ready for Absolutely Nothing, which is brilliant, my book of the year last year. And she's also been on her first ever cruise to Antarctica, which we'll come on to talk about shortly. But first, I just want to say thank you for welcoming us to your beautiful, beautiful home here in West Sussex. It really is the most spectacular English countryside backdrop. You have had the most extraordinary life and met incredible people along the way. Queen Elizabeth II, our late Queen, Princess Margaret, another Margaret, Margaret Thatcher, Imran Khan, I mean, extraordinary people, just the most amazing life. So if we can we start by looking back in time to some of the episodes from your early life? And I mean, I suppose what people most know you for, who are going to be watching, is your long career in fashion. So when did that first begin, that passion for fashion?
I've never really had a passion for fashion per se, in terms of what people wear. I love clothes and I like to look good. But I think my passion came when I worked for John Galliano, and I would spend hours with the pattern cutters and watching them cut this fabric. And he was a pioneer in the way he cut fabric, John, which was sort of cut on the bias almost, and against the grain, and no one had ever done that before. And
how old were you at this point?
So then I was 24, so I was 24 years old. And I loved that world. I loved being in a part of, in an environment that was so industrious and so creative and so detailed. And, I think I learnt that as a child, this kind of way of being incredibly observant, because my mother was severely bipolar, and I would kind of extract myself from that situation and took comfort in nature and my animals. And it was almost like I wasn't part of my life. I was on the outside because that's where I felt safest. I was on the outside looking in, and because of that I became very observant. And so working with fashion designers was very natural to me, and I would, be extremely interested in how clothes were made.
And so almost sort of at the engineering of the clothes.
Exactly, and that's what it was like. That's what it is like. It's a proper craft. It's not just drawing a little design and then whacking it on a mannequin. There is the toiles that have to be made, the way they're cut. They cut out the patterns to then cut out the fabric, and the measurements and the beading, and there's bugle beads, and then the pleating, all being done by hand, box pleats, sunray pleats. And it is like building a car. Building a jacket or a dress is the same as building a car.
It must give you such an amazing analytical eye, seeing how that structure, that piece of fashion engineering is put together.
Yeah, it's you notice things. You then see that item on a body, on a woman, and they probably got no idea what's gone into it. They look at their reflection in the mirror, but they don't know the amount of work and technical expertise that's gone into it to create that
And
garment.
I mean, there is a reason why those designers get to the very top, because of the nature of their expertise and how beautiful those items
and
look
they
on
have
someone.
to know every area. You can't become a designer I don't think, a true designer without knowing how to sew, how to cut pattern, how to cut fabric, which way to cut it, how to find the right fabric for whatever the item of clothing is going to be, how it's going to sit on a woman or a man's body. You have to learn so much to be a real artist as a fashion designer.
I mean, you obviously said when you were young, it was your animals that you loved, and you obviously spent quite a lot of time in the stable with your lovely pony rather than in the house. But you did have an unusual upbringing and quite privileged. You know, you were in a beautiful house on a English country estate, sort of think Downton Abbey, the coach house of Downton Abbey, say, and that was the world that you were born into, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was. I grew up in a the sort of archetypal English aristocratic environment, and that's just how it was. But the environment was different to most people's, and it was, I did have a privilege in terms of, my father was a successful businessman, but everything else was the same as everybody else. I had a mother who had really bad mental health issues, and the byproduct of that, the fallout of that, everything else was the same, but it was just this extraordinary backdrop.
Yeah.
And I was very privileged, but it's also, I think, for a child to grow up in that environment, it's kind of distorting, if you like, and I think I'm grateful to my mother's illness because I never really felt, I was quite detached from it. And I was very, very shy as a child. So I would be on the outside looking in, and I'd watch.
So because they had things like, lovely dinner parties, and I mean, you did get to witness, I'm thinking there probably was a seed in there of you getting into fashion by the lovely dinner parties and quite formal and people coming wearing gorgeous clothes as they came to, and you're sort of, I can picture you sort of maybe sitting on the stairs watching all this going on.
Yeah,
is that really as it was?
That's exactly how it was, and I'd watch my mother get dressed, and my mother was always the best dressed. Even as a child, I could notice that because my father would buy her clothes, and I wish I still have them, but I can't even get my leg into a skirt that she would be wearing. And it's extraordinary. We'd have like dinner on a Saturday night. So, if you or I were inviting our mates over for a Saturday night supper, it'd be round the kitchen table in our jeans and a t-shirt. But they dressed up. Women would wear a long skirt or dress, and men would be in velvet smoking jackets and a bow tie, which probably would come off halfway through dinner when they got pissed because they all drank so much, smoked so much, and so it was as much as the visual impact, but I remember the smells so well. I remember, following the smell of cigar smoke to where they were having dinner, and then, the sounds of crystal and silver cutlery. And
see, this is why you're such a good writer, because you've got all these details that you can still remember and still
I could write. It's like this glass, for example, this glass, I could write, you look at that and you think it's a glass and it's got some water, but I could easily write 3,000 words about that. There's so much that I see in there, the reflection, and then looking through the glass and seeing how it's distorting the grass, or how you look through it, a bit Picasso.
But that's it. I think that eye has, obviously served you very well in the world of fashion.
Yeah, it has, and also being able to, because I separated myself from it. I could read, became very good at reading people, and because I was my mother's watcher, I knew when she was going, on a downward spiral. So I became very emotionally intelligent. And that served me very well, especially in television when Trini and I were doing What Not to Wear.
Yeah.
And we were using clothes as a conduit to help a woman's self-confidence.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that I was most...
It was more than this is how you look.
Yeah.
You definitely helped people
and
reinvent themselves effectively.
Trini was brilliant at the fashion. She had a really, real, genuine interest in clothes, whereas I was a bit like, but I was very interested in how looking good could change the way you felt about yourself.
Yes, yeah.
And that was enormously useful when Trini and I started doing What Not to Wear.
Well, everything you've done since. But obviously, I have to ask you, you've been married to Steen for almost 30 years now, and you're very happily married, and you've got 3 gorgeous grown-up children. But obviously, looking back in time to the early days...
Are you calling me a strumpet, Gaby?
You had a relationship with Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth's nephew, David Linley. And, for 6 years you went out together and you got to know the royal family, Her Majesty the Queen and Princess Margaret and the other members of the royal family very, very well over that period of time. What was that? I mean, that must have been... did you have to pinch yourself when you were finding yourself in palaces, or did you just sort of take it for granted because you were going out with David?
Yeah, I mean, David was my boyfriend. Simple as that. David was my boyfriend. Princess Margaret was his mother. And I think my childhood was good training for that because, big houses and strangers and glamorous adults was what I'd grown up with. So I never did feel that. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way at all. And it was just how it was.
Just how it was.
And
I mean, you really loved Princess Margaret,
I
didn't you?
absolutely adored her. And she came into my life at a time when my mother was really suffering. And she was a woman who was extraordinarily emotionally intelligent. And I think she saw a vulnerability in me, so I was kind of almost became like her emotional project. And she was immensely supportive and understanding. And she did become like a surrogate mother to me.
Oh, how
and I could tell her anything. I felt, anything. We'd be in Mustique. I remember, I don't know if this will make the cut, but we'd been in Mustique and she said to me, this isn't in my book, but there's lots about the royal family and Princess Margaret in my book. But she said, darling, why aren't you going in the swimming pool? And I said, well, ma'am, I've just had my vaginal warts cauterised. And I wouldn't be able to, here I am saying it now, but because it's past, but, I could tell her anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
I mean, coming up, there's so many amazing anecdotes in your book about, getting to know the royal family. I mean, there's one that I think we just have to, for viewers, relive, which was when you were on holiday with the royal family at Balmoral, which, for anyone not living in the UK, is a beautiful castle in Scotland, and it is where the royal family, even now, will go on their summer holidays and various other holidays. They love it there because it's away from any cameras and it's very private and it's very beautiful. But so you're there with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and David, obviously, and Princess Margaret and various other members of the royal family. And then Margaret Thatcher, who was the then Prime Minister of the UK, comes to visit. And can you just explain the scenario that you found yourself in one afternoon? I think various other people had gone out shooting or something, hadn't they?
Let's just create the setting, okay, with Margaret Thatcher. So growing up, there were no female role models at all, unless it was Germaine Greer, who, like my dad would say, oh, well, she's very clever, but she's a lesbian. It's like, okay, well, she can't just be a clever, intelligent woman. Or there's Joan Bakewell, who was a news presenter, and, oh, well, she's thinking man's crumpet.
Yes.
There was always this caveat. Anyway, and then there was Margaret Thatcher. And I went to boarding school in England, and you have like a dormitory, and I'd have posters on my dormitory walls, and I had a poster of Margaret Thatcher, how sad am I, and of Elton John. And they were the two people I loved, I had crushes on. And, one became Prime Minister and the other was a homosexual, so I got that a little bit wrong. But, yes, so Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister at the time, and every year they always invite the current Prime Minister up to Balmoral to come and spend a week with, the Queen and now King Charles. So I was so excited, and I remember we'd always have these picnics by the river, and there was this little fishing hut, and so people were sort of, fly fishing for salmon on the side, and it was just me, Her Majesty the Queen, and Margaret Thatcher in this fishing hut. And the Queen said to me, Susannah, would you like a cup of tea? And I said, yes, Your Majesty, that'd be lovely. And so I got my teacup and held it out, and the Queen went to pick up this huge earthenware teapot and was going to, and I put my cup out and then was sort of holding the cup steady, focusing on the cup and saucer. And suddenly this pair of cans appeared and took the teapot out of the Queen's hands. And then the Queen took it back, and I was like witnessing this sort of manual tussle over this teapot. And it was Margaret Thatcher and the Queen fighting over who was going to pour the tea. And what was so interesting about that is that the Margaret Thatcher should never have done that from the start.
No. The Queen was very happy to pour the tea.
And she was and it was her teapot, but they were both fighting over who was going to play mother. So it's like you have the two most powerful people in the world at that time.
Yes,
Basically fighting over who was going to play mother.
The tea. Who won?
Well, the Queen obviously won, but actually you need to read the book to find out. But the Queen won. And then I kind of did a bit of research into tea, and it's where the suffragettes first emerged, because we had there were coffee houses in London in the 19th century, and women weren't allowed to go to these coffee houses. So it was the great and the good and the parliamentarians, etc. The men would go, and so they started up. That's where the Tea Party started, and they had these tea houses, and that's where the suffragettes emerged from. And then you wind them maybe forward, and there is the first female Prime Minister of England.
Trying to grab the teapot from the Queen.
Trying to grab the teapot.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, isn't that amazing?
That is extreme. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a historic moment, and I'm so happy the Queen won.
Yeah.
But another of the anecdotes, because I think your love for Princess Margaret, I mean, the whole world loved Her Majesty the Queen, and with Princess Margaret, I think has had different press, it would be fair to say, over the years, but you loved her very dearly, which I think is so lovely in the book. But also the thing that comes through is her wicked sense of humour, absolutely wicked. And I think, I don't know whether this will make the cut, but there is the best and the literally side-splitting anecdote of an event that you attended with her to Greenwich in London, to the National Maritime Museum, and it was a special lunch there. And I mean, you're going to have to tell the story here, but there was a little incident, wasn't there, in the bathrooms?
There was a little incident. So Princess Margaret would do these sort of summer tours around London every year, and this time it was to Greenwich, as you say, to the Maritime Museum, and we were having lunch in this a common area. It was a big table. It was almost Tupperware, but not quite. And Princess Margaret had go to the loo and to the bathroom, and she'd been gone for quite a long time. So I thought, I better go and see if she's okay. So I went to the bathroom. I couldn't find her, and I was shouting, "Ma'am, where are you?" And suddenly, the door was kicked open. One of the doors in the loo was kicked open, and there she was, almost with her Smythson cotton pants still round her ankles and her little block-heeled shoes. And she was like, she said, "Darling, will you go and get me a knife?" And I was, like the good foot soldier. I went, "Of course." And so I went off and I managed to find this cake slice. And I went back and gave it to her. And she took the knife from me and she turned round and started chopping in the toilet bowl. And so it was you don't need too much of an imagination to realise what she was doing. And she said, "Darling, it just won't go down. It won't go down."
Plumbing.
And so she was like chopping away. And then she handed me back the knife, which I wiped on a hand towel. And I still have that cake slice.
Oh, good.
I still have that cake slice. But that was, and that, again, it's an extraordinary anecdote. But it showed her resilience, her practicality. She was immensely practical, and there was no embarrassment at all. It was just like, this has happened, and this is what needs to be done.
Kind of sense of fun as well.
And she didn't care.
Yeah.
And she was so misunderstood in so many ways. And yes, she had an imperious side, and she could cut people down very quickly, but that's because she couldn't stand sycophants, and she would see through that very quickly, and she could not stand them.
But she had a lot of love and a lot of nurturing qualities with you. I mean, I think that the sort of final anecdote, which I think we have to explore, was, I think it was Her Majesty the Queen Mother's birthday party, where a certain pianist came to play for you, and somebody who's gone on to become a very close friend of yours, which is now Sir Elton John. And it was literally the royal family round the piano, all listening to him play. I mean, that being there, getting your very own concert from Elton John, that must have been amazing.
That was extraordinary. And like I said, I used to have posters of Elton on my wall. And when I heard he was coming for dinner, Dave and I used to go down and stay at Royal Lodge, very often. And when I heard that Elton was coming, I was beside myself, and we were all waiting and for him to arrive, and he came through the door, and I literally nearly pushed the Queen Mother over. She sort of stumbled, and in the back of my mind I was thinking, oh well, that's okay, she's probably going to be dead anyway soon, so it doesn't matter. I mean, this is how obsessed and awful I was, and I was determined to make him a friend. And I succeeded. It took a long time, but I did succeed. But yes, we were all standing around the piano, and the first song he played was Blue Eyes. Oh, it gave me goosebumps. And he sang it to the Queen Mother.
Oh.
And, she was like that with her little hand on her chest and her, breathing deeply. There was this kind of flirtation going on, and she had the most amazing sparkling blue eyes. And he sang that to her. And it was a real moment, but again, extraordinary anecdote. But you look back in the history and, if that had been in the 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, it would have been one of the great composers who had done that, who had gone to a royal household. Mozart or Beethoven would have gone and played for the royal household. But in the, 80s, it was Elton John.
And did you become friends sort of pretty quickly thereafter?
We've known each other, I think it's longevity, to be honest. We've known each other now for 40 years. And
again, as somebody interested in fashion, of all the wardrobes in the world to get access to, so Elton John's costumes...
He's an extraordinary... Again, he's funny enough, he's quite like my father, in so much that he has this incredible eye for beauty and quality, and he's he's become one of the most successful recording artists that the world has ever seen. But he won't just buy things, as I understand, because he can afford to. He will see the value, he'll see something that no one else can see in a photograph or a painting.
Well, I think
or
that
a piece
also
of
in obviously all his concerts, and you've been to lots of them, where they're sort of, no detail is missed, from everything from his shoes to his obviously amazing glasses, his hats, and the whole performance. And I mean, you being such a visual person as well, you must have such an appreciation of what's gone in, what goes into that.
Yeah, I do, and I love music, and I have a lot of friends who are musicians, and it is extraordinary, the detail and how complex staging something like that is. And that's actually David Furnish, Elton's husband, who is all over that, and again has an extraordinary eye. And it's like an art installation. Every concert now is like an art installation. It's mind-blowing.
Touching all your senses.
Yeah.
But, I'm going to take you back again because we could talk about Elton and his music for forever, but after your relationship with David Linney ended, you went on to have another famous boyfriend, Imran Khan, and again, I mean, you're very respectful about him in your book, but obviously you're a very interesting person, and you admire him deeply still. I think you're of him. But you went. The thing that struck me there is the trip that you did with him to Pakistan, and his pride and joy in this country of his. Can you tell us a little bit about that trip, because that must have been a unique experience, again, going with somebody who obviously has gone on to have a career leading
and
the
is
Pakistani...
now in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, at that time he was known and called himself. It was like, when I am a rising star. No, when I was a rising star, which he genuinely was, but he was captain of the cricket team, and cricket in Asia, Southeast Asia, in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, India, that is their life, that's life, that is the greatest thing. It's almost a religion. So he was captain. And I was very, I'd never been, I was quite sheltered. I was sheltered in so many ways, maybe not emotionally sheltered as a child, but I lived a very sheltered life, never travelled that much, was not worldly in any way, shape or form. Pakistan was so off my radar, and I went there and completely fell in love with the country, and that was because of Imran's love of the nation he was born into. And it was reflected in every single part, and he is, he's now, was Prime Minister for a short while and now in jail for corruption. And, he's he's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but the reason he went into politics was to try and wipe out corruption. And he always he was a vocational politician, or is a vocational politician. He's not in it for his own, power. He's not a megalomaniac. He wants the best for his country. And
what was it you loved about Pakistan when you went on that trip?
The Pakistanis, they have such pride in themselves. It doesn't matter. Yes, of course there was poverty, but within that there was so much pride. They were honourable people in that way. And yes, of course there was corruption, but they were so upfront about the corruption. And the people, I met very, very many people out there, and they have the same sense of humour as we do. And it was just
really eye-opening from the background you come from.
And seriously, when I went there, I felt like I'd come home. And given that it was so alien to anything I knew, but I went there and it was like,
I'm home. Because obviously, part of we're going to talk about, in a moment is travel, obviously. Yeah. And do you think that kind of hunger to go and see things came from that trip to Pakistan?
I think it did, because it was so, we went up, we did this incredible trek from Islamabad up into through the Karakorums and the northwest frontier, and then we went from the Himalayas crossed over into the Karakorums, back into the Karakorums, went to Swat and Gilgit and all these amazing places which no one had ever been to before. We were the first Westerners to go there, pretty much. And but even though in these backward, tiny, tiny villages, high up in the Karakorums, they knew that Imran was coming and they welcomed him. But the beauty of that country up in the mountains is like nothing you've seen before. And that definitely ignited a thirst for travel.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not the fast forward from them. You obviously met and married Steen, and you've been married happily for almost 30 years now. You've got 3 grown-up children who are all making their own way. But I think your holidays until earlier this year, which we'll talk about in a minute, you have been maybe sparked from that first trip to Pakistan, have been fairly adventurous, haven't they? I mean, talk us through what until this year was a typical holiday for you.
Well, holidays for us are as far away from people as possible. Some of them quite extreme, untrodden path. I mean, we like to go, not to the typical tourist places, although obviously we've been lucky enough to go. Naples is a great city, Rome, Paris, not really. So some of the amazing cities that the world has, but it's always off the beaten track that we go, and as far away from people as possible. And that's what.
And you like hiking, and you like active.
I love all that. Being outdoors, sitting on a beach. Don't get me wrong. Sod UV and everything. I like to get tan. Yeah. And but to do that sitting on a beach, I'd rather go and drown myself in the sea, quite frankly. I like to be doing things.
you'd never, until this year, been on a cruise, and you're talking to Viking.TV because you obviously had a life-changing trip this year. What persuaded you onto your first cruise? What made you think, do you know what, maybe I'll do this?
Well, actually, you did, Gabby, because you were so overexcited about it. I think it was like, no, well, why would I go? It was like, why not? And of course, like many people, I had a preconception of cruising, you know, boat overladen with people, just not being able to get away from anywhere, everyone queuing up to get food, tiny little cabin, everyone being old and infirmed. You know, I'm not exactly young, but and it just
And then eyewear designer Tom Davies.
yeah,
And
glasses. These
yeah,
glasses
we both have his amazing
Yeah.
eyewear. So he
See
then
better.
obviously was on this cruise to
Yeah.
Antarctica with Viking, as I was
Yeah.
on the same cruise, and you were watching both of our Instagrams.
I was watching your
and-
Instagrams and I thought, my God. And that is the one place that has been the top of my bucket list since I was able to think as a child.
So you put
Antarctica.
all those
Yeah, all
perceptions,
this-
you put it aside and thought, I'll
I
give
thought,
it a
okay,
go.
if this is the way I'm going to get, okay, sod the cruise. I'm going to be honest, sod the cruise, sod the fact that this is the only way I'm going to do it is going on a bloody cruise. I'm going to go because I want to go and set foot on Antarctica. Anyway, my God, was I blown away.
Yeah.
We got on that boat. I have never...
AK ship.
AK ship, sorry, yeah, ship. Octantis.
And it's Octantis, yeah.
And I've never...
Which is one of the expedition
ships. And I have never in my life seen anything like it. I didn't think it was possible for a ship to look like that. And it was the most extraordinary ship and trip that we've ever had. Steen was really reticent. It was like, okay, well, if I have to come, I have to
Well,
come.
I remember I was here when you were packing, and you were saying, tell him how good it is.
Yeah, because he was
but
like...
it's hard to convey, isn't it? But tell us about the ship first. What did you love most about the ship?
I mean, the Scandinavians are so brilliant. Well, I think they are the only people who can make minimalism look cosy. And they've achieved that. And it's so exquisitely done. It's leather, chrome, glass, wood. Very simple, but the best quality. The unbelievable art they have in these ships. I mean, extraordinary. You know, you can just spend a whole morning going around looking at the art. And even though there were, just over 300 people on the boat, you felt like you were in your own... you were on your own.
The sense of space is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and we'd find little corners to go and read, and it's an educational cruise. So you're not just sitting there stuffing your face with as much food as you can.
Although the food is amazing.
Although I did that, and the food is, extraordinary and so delicious, and the best quality produce. It was so interesting. We learnt so much, and you never felt
Did you
bored.
go? Because there are lectures
They have these
talks.
given by global experts on krill or penguins or humpback whales or the environmental changes. And Steen and I, we really threw ourselves into it.
Oh, good.
And we went to every single talk.
Well done.
We did everything. We packed our days, and
so you loved the ship. You loved obviously the lectures.
Yeah.
Before we get to the highlights, obviously you go from Ushuaia, and then you have to go across the Drake Passage, which I think people call it either the Drake Shakes or the Drake Lake.
Yeah.
Were you lucky and get a Drake? So
we
was
had
it
a
flat
bit
or
of a
was it-
shake.
Did you have a bit of a?
Yeah.
And were you okay with that?
Yeah, because we took Dramamine.
Yeah.
People said, "Oh, get the wristbands." That they don't work. Just ignore that. And the crew said that didn't work. So we had Dramamine. So we were
And you
right.
were fine.
But
Yeah.
you were rocking around quite a lot. But the boat is so stable. If you've been on any other ship, you would have really felt it. And I didn't see anyone with seasickness.
No. They're incredible because I was, similarly. It was just, it's so stable. It was a revelation really that this, it was so smooth, actually.
That's another thing. It's like you're inside something which is state of the art, maritime technology and excellence, and that in itself is so interesting.
Incredible. But then you get to Antarctica, and can you just, describe what you saw and how you felt about when you actually reached Antarctica?
I mean, how can you describe it? Okay, bearing in mind you're on the Antarctic Peninsula, which, okay, look at my hand. So that's Antarctica, and the Antarctica Peninsula is you probably can't see it, but that blade of grass. And on that blade of grass, we're on a tiny little pinprick at the end. The immensity. That's the thing. It's like, and not a sound. The immensity of this continent. That's the first thing I was struck by. And the colours in the ice.
Yeah, I think because you think it's going to be white, don't you? And it's
yellow. You get reflection from the sun, reflection from the water. And as someone who loves nature, it was. I've never experienced anything like that in my life before. And it's the purity. It was like everything bad in the world, everything that's happened historically, had been wiped clean, and here you could start again. And
so you've got these icebergs, these huge
mountains, these huge mountains, and the clarity of the water, and it's just, and then a humpback whale would pop out and flip its tail, and you just. It's so hard.
So tell
to
us
do
about which wildlife you saw. So you saw humpbacks.
We saw humpbacks breaching, which was extraordinary. When they both come up and they sort of twist around. There were two of them with two babies, so they were jumping up and twisting around. We saw pods of orcas. I mean, I do run around the boat, quite a few times because I wanted to stay vaguely fit and wrap up, and I'd run around the deck, and it was like this, nature was pushing on a show for me. That I'd be running along and there'd be a penguin, floating by on a little ice floe, and then there'd be some orcas, and then I'd see the tail of a humpback whale, and that was, to see that was so humbling.
Yeah, incredible. And so penguins, because penguin you can get quite obsessed with, can't you, when you're on an Antarctica cruise. Did you love them? I mean,
they're just so adorable.
And these different types of penguin.
They're so perfectly designed, aren't they? They're like...
For that environment, yes, they are incredible. Then you went and visited...
But just visually, they look like they've been designed by Karl Lagerfeld. The black and white, and everything is perfect. They're so clean, but the smell is something different when you go on land and you go and see the penguins. This smell of their poo. They're such fascinating creatures. They're so busy all the time.
And they have huge personalities for little creatures.
Yeah, for when they go in the water and they're kind of waddling up, and then they get into the water and they become these torpedoes.
And how much the gentoos were my favourite. I don't know if you had a favourite.
Yeah, the gentoos were really... Yeah, I agree.
The Adelie penguins are more sophisticated.
Yes.
But the gentoos are
just comical.
So much fun, aren't they?
Yeah, they're like little comic characters. Well, there is Pingu, isn't it? That was... He was based on
maybe.
Gentoo,
I think they are like that because they do all sorts of acrobatic.
Yeah.
Again, it feels like they're putting on a show for you, which of course they're not. But it feels that way when they're porpoising in and out of the water.
And they have no fear because so few people go down there. They have no fear of humans.
You're not on the ship all the time, are you, when you're down there? So did you had the opportunity? You went out on the Zodiacs and the
every Zodiac available. I mean, virtually pushing people in the water to get onto a Zodiac. But we did the Zodiac. We did the covered
special
boat,
operations boat.
Submarine.
Which sort of goes very quickly, the special operations boat, doesn't it?
So it does that. So we did as much as possible.
And then obviously, yes, you mentioned the submarine. Yeah. So you went down
went down in the submarine.
And what did you see from the submarine?
Like, oh God, it's just all a bit. And then we were watching, and it is to think that you are on a bit of the ocean floor that no one has ever been in is quite unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
Must be like going to up into space.
Yeah.
And that's,
And the sense of it's overwhelming almost, isn't it?
very emotional. I felt very emotional, but you don't actually see very much because it's too cold for most things to survive. But we did see this thing kind of came floating by, and it was a phantom octopus, and it was the only 127th sighting of a phantom
Octopus or jellyfish?
jellyfish.
A phantom jellyfish.
Yeah,
it's a phantom jellyfish, isn't it?
And
because you were so lucky because, I mean, they scarcely ever sighted, are they?
And so we were the 127th sighting of one of these jellyfishes.
I mean,
ever.
Unbelievable.
So that was like a real notch on my bedpost. I milked that one big time.
Yeah, milk it forevermore. And then also you went out on a kayak,
We did the kayaking.
I mean, that's so lucky.
It was beautiful, and we got in, and you know, there's the staff. Can I just say, the crew were the best thing about it. They were so attentive, so sweet. They probably get asked the same bloody questions over and over again, but it's like they've been asked it for the first time. Just such wonderful people, and you know, you get told how to get in and out of a kayak, and you know, I was like, oh no, come on. But actually, it is quite difficult when you're going for a rib into a kayak and it's wobbly.
Well, also, and you really don't want to fall in the water.
You don't want to fall in the water.
I know you love cold water, but I mean, that's really cold.
That's really, really cold. But then you have to get back out of it again. And I think it probably took me about 20 minutes and 4 people pushing me. Great lardy person to get my arse into. I could not do it. I had no strength. I was just sort of stuck in this really ungainly fashion between the kayak and the rib, and I was thinking,
but
you know what, I'm quite a lot younger than all these people. Well, bad luck, you know, it's going to take you a while. And I was by far and the worst and the most ungainly.
But how patient are the crew? I mean, they're so patient, aren't they?
And they don't make you feel like an idiot. You know, I could have felt, Steen, my husband, did a good job of making me feel like an idiot.
Of course, that's his job.
You know, that's what he does. But they were, no, this happens all the time, and they just are. And
so, of all those experiences, the Zodiacs, the Special Operations Boat, the kayaking, the submarine, is there one that particularly stands out as a highlight, or was it all of them for you?
For me, the most extraordinary thing was running or walking around the deck in that cold, breathing in that champagne air. Yes, you can hear the boat, but it's extraordinarily quiet. You know, the engines, you barely hear them. And that feeling of isolation, being at the bottom of the world in an environment that very few people have seen. And that was what I did it every day. I'd go up on my own so I could really absorb the privilege of being there, but then doing it in such luxury and but understated luxury and comfort. And also another thing I loved, I don't know if you found this, is like cruises, you know, people bring 25 suitcases and they dress up every night. That would prevent me from going. We'd be in our thermals, you know, for dinner every night. No one gave a damn.
This from somebody who's spent their life in fashion.
This is from, which...
So I suppose it's kind of nice in a way, permission to just be relaxed, completely relaxed
I just can't,
a couple of weeks.
It puts me off being sociable now, having to dress up. But that was wonderful. You know, it was so relaxed, but you were doing it in a 5-star environment.
Yeah. So if we've got viewers who are looking to do this, and I think it was the Explorer itinerary that you did, if you could suggest from your packing list 2 or 3 items that you'd say, actually put this in, what would they be? So you wouldn't worry too much about anything smart for dinner, or, you know, just...
Waste of time.
Okay, so...
I think like you're going skiing.
Okay.
If you've been skiing before, take the same things. And actually, it's cold, but it's not that cold. You know, it's like a kind of... You're not going to get frostbite.
And you get these great jackets. You get given fantastic
jackets and trousers to wear. So I would just say take mufti, take really casual, comfortable clothes, and maybe a couple of nice tops. You know, I took this shirt, for example, and I was in jeans or thermal leggings, all the time. So don't stress about what you're going to take. But I'm just trying to think if there was anything. Oh, and although they have blackout curtain, a blackout blind because it's light 24 hours a day.
Of course, yeah.
We like to have the window open, and I took an eye mask, which was a good thing to take. Books, I read so much.
I mean, there's lots of books on the ship.
Lots of amazing books.
And there's an amazing spa. I hope did you go into the spa?
I didn't
at all?
go into the spa.
It's very lovely.
I know.
Very,
I
very
missed
lovely.
out on that,
And
only because I was so determined to be outdoors.
But you did. I mean, not everybody does what you did, which I definitely didn't. Which was a so-called polar plunge, which I think there's one of the pools on the ship. They had.
Yeah.
I mean, you are a lover of cold water anyway. I know you're an advocate for how fantastic it makes you feel afterwards. But tell us about that experience.
A lot of people did it.
Did they?
Hats off to them. Yeah, a lot of people did it, and they kind of take. I don't know how they do it, but they fill up one of the pool areas with the seawater, and I think they probably throw in a few ice cubes from the ice bucket. I'm not sure.
Just for good measure.
Just for good measure. And you jump in and jump out. And when I go into cold water, and I've broken ice to get into cold water, so I wasn't particularly worried. But when I've done that, I get in very, very slowly, but with purpose when I'm going into very cold water. And here you were jumping in head under. And actually, it was okay. It was such a wonderful thing to do, because cold water swimming, when you're doing it with other people, you bond because you've done something that you're not used to doing, and so it's like, oh my God, you did that! We did it, and it was fabulous. And I kind of wish that we'd done that a bit earlier, because I met some really lovely people after that, and we were chatting, and I wish I'd had more time to spend with them.
The polar plunge, but actually that's a really good point, because I think on the ship, because it is small and you're only a couple of hundred or 230 people odd, you are bonded with them. I mean, because you're seeing this incredible, the seventh continent, which most people don't get to see. It is a privilege, and I think there is that on the ship of having this special experience together, isn't there?
Completely, and you're doing it together. And the other passengers were so lovely. There were a lot of Americans, quite a lot of Australians, and very few British actually. But everyone who was on that cruise, they were on they were experienced the top of their bucket list, and so we all had that together. We were experiencing something together that had been in our dreams since we were children.
Yeah, so special. I mean, incredible. And then has it now whetted your appetite to do more? And now that you've got over I think once you've done Viking, you can't go. I mean, with anyone. I mean,
we saw other cruise ships
beautiful
down there, and I was such a snotty cow. I was just looking at them and think, oh God, you poor thing. We're on Viking. Oh, are you with that? Oh, bad luck. I was so chuffed to be on Viking.
Yes.
And I can't wait.
So where would be
again.
the next place that you would want to go?
My husband and I will be married 30 years next year in 2025, April. And we went on honeymoon to Egypt.
Oh, okay.
But we were only there because Steen was in the middle of a court case. He wasn't the criminal, by the way. And so we could only go for 4 days. And I would love to do their Nile River cruise.
Yeah, well, I know they have two lovely new river.
Oh, do they?
River boats. So I'm sure that you'll have to do that for your 30th wedding anniversary.
I would like, because when you're I wasn't that young when we got married, but I didn't really appreciate where we were going. And so I think I missed out on an awful lot.
And you'd really appreciate it. And because
now I'm fascinated
because
by
you're
the history
into the lectures and the history, into
but
the naming ceremonies are coming up sort of fairly soon, so it'll be perfect timing to go on one of the new river.
That's another
next
dream.
Year. So, well, can we come back and talk to you once you've done that?
Yeah,
one
and
then,
can we
next
do that
year?
together, maybe?
Maybe.
And get Tom along too.
Yes, I think that
Yeah.
would be good. Well, thank you so much. It's been fantastic to hear about your
Gaby.
life and your amazing cruise experience. And I'm sure you've encouraged a lot of people to have a
Well,
look
I
at
hope
that
so.
itinerary.
I hope so.
It is, you know, as you say,
It's life-changing.
It's life-changing
Going on,
experience.
and I'm not just saying this, but going on a Viking ship will change your life. Genuinely, it really will.
And that particular to Antarctica is so, so special. So thank you, Susannah
Pleasure.
Constantine.
I've loved
It's
it.
been lovely chatting to you about it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.